Hi, I'm Lorin Wilson. This is me doing a long run in Flagstaff on Mountaineer Road. I am training for the Tunnel Hill 100 on November 13th, 2021. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about this long run. I'm wearing the stryd pod for the first time ever, which measures your power output while running. So I wanted to talk about training with power. And then I also wanted to talk a little bit about my running form and some of the different things that I'm working on to make my body stronger, more balanced, and more efficient. So the first thing is power. So power has been utilized in cycling and in triathlon as a metric that people use to gauge their performance and to pace themselves. And a lot of times people want to make an argument, power is better than heart rate, or heart rate's better than power. And I'm from the school of thought of it's just another piece of data. I'm not trying to replace another metric. I'm not trying to replace heart rate. I'm not trying to replace rate of perceived exertion. I'm trying to see the pros and the cons of power in the context and in relation, complementary to my heart rate, complementary to my pacing, complementary to my rate of perceived exertion. That's why I got the stryd pod. And so the benefit of power, especially in ultra running, is that it's not so much dependent on a whole lot of other variables. So power equals your work divided by your time. And your work is your force times your displacement. So mass times acceleration times the displacement of that mass over time. So how much can I produce a force and move a mass over a distance in the shortest amount of time? That's going to give you a greater power. And so that is measured in watts. And that can stay constant whether there's a hill, whether there's technical terrain, whether there's wind. You can use power to try to maintain that threshold where your pace over all those different variables may start to differ. Your heart rate may start to spike and go down or start to fluctuate. As you start to run further and further, no matter what, you're going to experience cardiac drift in your heart rate. So the heart starts to fatigue and the electrical signal between the nodes starts to fluctuate as well, and the heart rate's going to naturally go up. As you dehydrate, your heart rate's going to naturally start to go up. So your heart rate gives you a lot of insight into how your body's doing. Also paying attention to your breath, having awareness of how your legs are feeling, how your breath is feeling, how your movement is feeling. All of that's very important, and it's important to realize how it fluctuates and the variables that can affect it. And then, right, we have power where less variables are going to affect it. If I'm starting to fatigue, okay, my power might start to go down. So how do I track that over time? And that's the next thing, is how do you use power in the context of a training system? So one is you want to establish your power across different running speeds. So what is my absolute power? So if I were to sprint all out for about 10 to 30 seconds, what is my power in that lactic explosive phosphate system? Next, my Vo2 Max. When I'm running at Vo2 Max, so 12 to 15 minutes all out, what is my power output there? After that, we have lactic threshold, 20 to 25 minute run before the lactate starts to accumulate faster than the muscle can use it as a fuel source. What is my power output there? And then we're going to have the 1 hour. So if I were to do a 1 hour tempo, so about 85 to 90% effort, I believe other sports or stryd likes to call that the FTP, or the functional threshold power. So it's not all out for an hour, but it's about 85 to 90% effort. That aerobic threshold, or the point that I am maximizing my aerobic development. what is my power output there? And then finally, critical power. So if I were to run for 1 hour all out, what is my power output? And then if you're going to be doing ultra running and marathon running, it's okay, what is my long run power output for 2-3 hours? What is my body able to produce in watts there as well? And you're tracking all of those different power outputs over time. So that is something that's important there in terms of absolute power output. So what is my ability to produce power in a given max moment? And then what is my ability to produce power over time, or my endurance capacity to hold a certain power? And then the other one is efficiency, right? So stryd is going to give you a form power ratio, which is a measure of your efficiency, and they use a metric called leg stiffness in conjunction with your power to come up with this efficiency metric. So just because you're able to produce a lot of power, right? A bodybuilder is able to produce a lot of power. Does that translate to the movement or the movement pattern that I'm trying to execute, in this case, running? So how much power I put into the ground, how much of that is absorbed by the body or the system to move me forward? And then how much is lost as heat, or how much of it is not returned? It's just absorbed by my muscles, absorbed by my joints, which is going to lead to a higher risk of injury. So how much of the power I'm producing is used to move me forward, and how much of it is just lost? So that's an efficiency rating. Training in the context of power, right? I want to work on those things, all three of them. I want to work on improving my ability to produce a lot of power, right? So I can run faster. I can run it faster than race pace, or I can lift weights. And a lot of runners tend to not lift weights because it's not their primary activity, and they're losing capacity. You want to be able to push your power up, not so much that you start to bulk, which won't happen if you're doing enough cardio. You're not going to bulk up, and then if you're eating correctly as well, you're not overeating too many protein bars, etc. You want to push that max power capacity up so that when you're running at a relative power output, you're running at a lower relative percentage of your max. And so that's what I've been working on all off season, as I've been doing a lot of shorter, faster runs, faster than race pace, so maybe at marathon to 50-mile race pace, so that when I go to 100-mile race pace, I can really starts to feel more efficient and starts to feel easier. And then one of the other things, sorry, thanks for letting me just kind of rewind it here. Yeah, so I was talking about power, absolute power output, so that you run at a lower percentage of your relative max. And then you want to increase your endurance capacity. So how long can I run at my critical power threshold over time? You can start to gauge that. And then you can start to, again, gauge that efficiency. So how economical are you running early in runs at a given speed? And then when does that start to drift off? And then what protocols or conscious cues have you established to maybe maintain that efficiency a little bit longer, right? So when you start to fatigue, your form starts to break down. Those imbalances start to reveal themselves. You can consciously think of different things to maintain your form. With that said, though, I mean, at the end of the day, if you're not mobile enough, you're not strong enough, or you don't have enough endurance, the form is going to do what the form is going to do. But if you become aware of your form, you can start to develop strategies to at least delay form breakdowns. And so that's what I'm going to go into here, is analyzing my form. So one of the big things with me is I tend to favor my right side. So a lot of people do that. In a day-to-day situation, I might tend to lean more onto my right leg. I might tend to put all my weight on my right leg. So that's one of the first things that I want to do, because I'm spending most of my day not running, not exercising. So I want to capture that time. I want to bring awareness to keeping my weight relatively even throughout the day, maybe favoring my left side a little bit, favoring my right side a little bit, maintaining just how the even use of the left and the right side throughout the day. When I'm running, my right side is stronger. However, I had an ankle injury as a child, right? Injury history. And what that did is over time, the feedback from the foot and the ankle complex, that signal from the ground, was weak and had static to it. So then my hip got weak over time. And I ran like that for a long time. I would get hurt, recover, get hurt, recover, before I finally started to study biomechanics and figure this stuff out. And I still work on it every day, but when I start to fatigue, these things start to happen. So let's take a look at that. So when I go down, I hit the ground with that right foot, right, you can see what's called a valgus knee collapse. So from my hip down to my right knee, it starts to collapse inwards towards that left leg. And then you can also see I have prolonged pronation. So my arch starts to collapse in longer on the ground as well. My right foot is rotated out as well. And then as it pushes off, you can see there's a little bit of a medial heel whip on that right side. So right there is a good example of that medial heel whip. So it's already starting to rotate out, my forefoot is, and I push off. And then you can see there my right heel is pointed off to the left, and my right knee and right leg is pointed out towards the right. And so that all starts right here when that leg hits the ground and starts to crash in. Then if we look at the left side, right, I kind of have that pronation as well, but some of that is from the terrain. I'm on a slanted ground. But you can see really bad on this left side what's called a lateral heel whip. So my left heel is pointed way out. My left foot is pointing to the right. My left leg is pointing to the right as well. So my right leg was pointing to the right. My left leg is pointing to the right. So my pelvis is rotated abnormally. And so you can see this abnormal rotation through the hips and through the feet while one is running. And so what's happening here, when my left foot hits the ground, it starts to internally rotate. So then when the right leg passes the left leg, my left leg should start to enter propulsion. My heel comes off the ground, I start to toe off, and my external rotators through my glute and through my obliques should start to engage. There's a delay in that happening, or it doesn't happen. So what's happening is I'm using the momentum of my pelvis rotating forward, my right leg rotating forward, just because the rest of my mass is moving forward. Well, my left leg has to come off the ground with it. Since the external rotators didn't engage, my leg is still internal rotation, and it just comes off the ground. And then as your leg comes forward into hip flexion, well, it's got to externally rotate. The hip has to externally rotate to get into flexion. And so that's what you're seeing here. It's in that internal rotation, but as it comes forward, it starts to externally rotate now before hitting and doing it again. So I use my right side excessively, causes a tight ankle, causes a tight hip, causes a medial heel whip on the right side. I don't use my left legs enough when I fatigue, or the left glute med and the left glute max. So when it pushes off, I get that lateral heel whipping. Another thing on this left side is this hip drop. So when I'm on my left leg, all my weight's on the left leg, you can see how my right hip drops to the side. So that is a contralateral hip drop on the left leg. So my left glute med is fatigued, weak, and not engaging at the proper time, right? So that's kind of my big thing, is my right hip and quad get tight because I use it more so than the left side. The pelvis starts to rotate right to left, and that causes a lot of abnormal twisting, medial heel whip, lateral heel whip. It goes away once I get off this uphill section. So it was an out and back. I ran 7 miles downhill, and I turned around and had to run 7 miles uphill. So I was just towards the end of that uphill section, really, really starting to fatigue. And I could feel it. I started to feel my adductor and my right shin, and my right adductor starting to tighten up a little bit. So I was trying to push off back more in extension with my right leg, and I was trying to lift up faster, so decrease my ground contact time and push off of the ground harder with my left side, trying to get the left glute to engage, trying to extend the right leg back. Okay. And so right now I'm going to go ahead and try to find the side portion of this video so I can talk a little bit. Oh, here we go, right here. Talk a little bit about the side. So from the side, what I'm seeing is my right leg hits right here, and you can see the angle from my hip down to my knee down to my ankle. So that's going to be my knee flexion. My foot's underneath my knee, so that's good. But you can see I hit with a lot of knee flexion on this right side versus this left side. When I hit, not only am I hitting on the rear foot compared to the more of the middle of the foot on the right side, but you can see that knee flexion also isn't as significant on this left side. So I'm hitting with less knee flexion on the left side. And then what does that do? Well, if we look at this right side, right here, I hit, my body starts to collapse. I'm already in a significant amount of knee flexion right here. So if I were to look at the angle from the hip to the knee down to the ankle, and I'm not over the foot, right? So my body's already flexed down. I'm already in a significant amount of knee flexion, but my body's not over it yet. Whereas on this left side, I hit, and then it starts to bend, but I'm a lot more over that foot on that left side through mid stance. So this on the right side, when I'm all that knee flexion right there and I'm not over it, that's a lot more strain through the ankle, through the knee, through the quad. So I'm using that right side. I'm collapsing more on that right side. But then also, it's going to, once the right leg goes into hip extension, well, it's going to come off the ground faster because it already flexed right here. I've already absorbed all the load. So now it's going to start to extend, and it's going to push off a little bit sooner. So if we look at the distance, look at my left knee drive, and look at how far back my right leg is, and then left leg, you can see it's a little bit more open there. But that's a little bit late, as I was already talking about from the back. So boom, right there, see how close that left leg is to the right leg, and it comes off the ground, and then a lot greater distance right there. But that's a little too much because it's not symmetrical. We know my left leg is exhibiting that lateral heel whip, so it's not pushing off soon enough. So that's one of the big imbalances that I have that you can really see. Is I'm using that right leg too much, flexes down fast, comes up to into extension too early, so a lot of calf dominance because I'm not giving my right leg, my right glute enough time to activate the extensor muscles in the glutes, so I'm not using that. I'm using a lot more hamstring and calf to push off on that right side. And then on the left side, it's more of I'm not really using the left glute. I'm using momentum in my obliques as I get tired. But again, I'm very aware of this stuff. So I am consciously pushing off behind me with the right. I'm consciously trying to lift up with the left foot. And then once I get off this hill and I start to go back downhill, those mechanics start to clean up a little bit. They start to get a little bit more even. I'm starting to push off a little bit sooner with the left foot. I'm starting to push off back a little bit more with the right foot. And then those heel whipping actions start to disintegrate a little bit. So yeah, I hope that this was informational. I apologize for the video editing and kind of the low battery thing coming up, but it's my first video, so again, I'm trying to make some more content, and I hope you guys enjoy it and follow me at Tunnel Hill. Thanks for your time. Later.